And here we are with Zach Even-Esh. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
All right, good. So tell me a little bit about Underground Strength Coach. I mean, you're rocking over there. You got tons of people following what you're doing. You've got I think you started a movement, and just a lot of stuff that's non-traditional in terms of strength and conditioning that I grew up with. You know, I grew up with in a weight room, and it was. You do bench press and you go down and you go up and you go down, all the very regimented stuff and a lot of it wasn't as functional strength. I think a lot of stuff you do from what I've seen, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it just seems like you do a lot of functional strength stuff, which, you grew up, you were a wrestler, I was a wrestler, really, really great for wrestling. But, I trained with the UVA, University of Virginia, football strength coach, and actually he's back as their strength coach now, a guy named Evan, and they had kegs in there with water, they started, so he really started getting into the functional strength movement as well. And so anyway, rap with me, tell me a little bit, tell me what's going on, how'd you get there, how'd all that stuff start, Zach?
So I was just laughing because I was like, oh man, Jim's going to be asking me about these, how I got into all this stuff. So I just turned 36, and I started wrestling in high school as a freshman. So I was 13 when I got into high school. That was the fall of '89, and it was a packed team. Wrestling was huge, even though there weren't any clubs. The only club back then was actually Edge. So you probably have heard of Ernie Monaco.
Yeah,
and he had, I think, that was probably one of the very few wrestling clubs in the country, let alone in New Jersey. So there was really, nowhere to go get outside training. I never wrestled before. I had to wrestle off for the freshman team. Back then, we had freshman teams. Nowadays, it's just JV and varsity. And I was not strong at all. There was a very strong rec team. All the kids joining the team were rec wrestlers. I got pinned every match as a freshman, every wrestle-off, lost every wrestle-off, never won, no matter how hard I worked, how hard I trained. I didn't really know what to do, and obviously my wrestling skills were not like these other kids. And, man, it just really killed my mindset. Probably was like the worst thing that could have been done for me, is just to go out and lose over and over by pin. So my older brother, that was his second year wrestling. He was a junior. He started wrestling as a sophomore. Junior year, he was varsity. And somehow, some way, he found out about the John Smith intensive camp. It was the first intensive camp that John Smith was going to hold, and it was at College of New Jersey. Back then it was called TCNJ, Trenton College in Jersey.
Yeah.
So went to this intensive camp after my first year of wrestling, never winning a match, and every kid in the room was a state qualifier, a state placer, a state champ. And I just got smashed over and over from the time I woke up throughout the whole day. We had 4 sessions a day. We'd have a run in the morning. It would be a 5 to 10K run. Then we would have 2 to 3 wrestling sessions, and then at night it would be either a wrestling session or a lift. And all we drilled was high crotch, low single, and every variation that would come with it, along with stance. Bloody collarbones at the end of every day. So the next year, or starting from then and after that season, all I did was train. But I trained like a bodybuilder. That was the only information that was available to people. There was no strength and conditioning books out. Everything you picked up was bodybuilding.
Yeah.
So all I understood was, machines. Everything was squeeze the muscle, feel the muscle. Don't worry about how much weight you use. Just get a pump, mind-muscle connection. There was nothing about, training for explosiveness, training for speed. There was nothing for special strengths, which is strength endurance, strength speed, all these special, all these basically the physiological things that your body needs as a wrestler. None of that stuff was out and about. There was no talk of jumping or any of that shit. It was go, run for distance, and lift weights. So I lifted weights, and I went from 130 freshman season to 145 sophomore year. Put on a lot of muscle. looked really good. And I think my record sophomore year was 10-5. So and I was JV that year, and I was not strong though. I looked strong, but my basically my like secret weapon was I could take anybody down with a low single after going to the John Smith camp. So I could hit a low single on anybody, but I was not strong. And
I have a John Smith low single tape, and I tell every kid that I coach this, from the college guys on down to the little guys.
Yeah.
When I grew up, I had a VHS tape, a John Smith VHS tape. It was how low can you go? I'm sure some of the people watching this have seen that video or the new DVD out now. But every time I watched that, from when I was younger through college, every time I watched that video, I had an awesome low single for about 2 weeks, and then I wasn't really a low single guy, so I'd kind of fade away from it. But anyway, yeah.
That low single was, I still remember like guys would try to stop it. They would like adjust their stance. They would start like wrestling on one knee. You know, they were like on one knee.
Yeah.
I would still hit low singles. I was able to hit a low single even if you weren't on your feet. If you were kneeling, I found a way to like hit a low single, like a sweep low single, because that's what we drilled for about 6 hours a day.
Yeah.
It was insane. So I trained like a bodybuilder. And I fell in love with the training. I was really addicted to training. It was not odd for me to train 30 days, out of the month, nonstop, Monday through Sunday. It was just nonstop. But what I was doing was building my appearance, looking strong, but I wasn't strong. And now, from what I know now, I look back and I remember wrestling. And after first period, like my forearms were shot. My body just felt exhausted, like completely wiped out. And I remember it would affect my psychology, my confidence. I used to start, getting to that second period saying, I trained so hard. Why am I tired? And then it would really ruin my success. And by junior year, I started having issues with my knees. And I was getting injured. If it wasn't my knee, it was my shoulder, then my back. And I was so confused. I was a kid, 15, 16 years old. I was young for high school. I didn't turn 17 till senior year, till December of senior year. And my mentality just wasn't developed. I didn't have like a killer instinct. And we had some real tough kids on the team. And I always just questioned like why I wasn't like them, why I wasn't strong, or why do I look strong but I'm actually not strong. Mm-hmm. So after high school, I just didn't want to wrestle anymore. I was burnt out. My knees, I had knee problems junior and senior year. I just wanted a break freshman year. So I stuck to the weightlifting, fell in love with training, and I planned to wrestle. And then my sophomore year, the program was cut at Kane College, which was a great program. So I got involved with coaching. But I was always wrestling. Whenever I was coaching, I was constantly wrestling, going to open mats, competing in open tournaments, and the success was just average. Then I got into jiu-jitsu, and it was one injury after another after another. If I was involved in some sort of wrestling or grappling, I was hurt. And I used to question, like, how am I hurt? I'm like this strong, big, strong guy. I look so strong. So finally, after I tore my ACL, this is in my mid-20s, I was like 25, 26. It's kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. And now, at that time, the buzzword was sports-specific training. And everybody was like training on stability balls on one leg, just like doing crazy shit that just made no sense to me. And one guy that I was speaking to was talking about the wrestlers in Pennsylvania, Iowa, Minnesota, talking about farm boy strength. Yeah. How these guys basically, every wrestler in Pennsylvania has a garage with a climbing rope in it, and all these kids work on farms, and they're baling hay, digging ditches, pushing trucks, carrying wheelbarrows,
splitting wood. That's what I grew up doing in Pennsylvania, splitting and hauling wood.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm with you.
It just started making sense to me. I was like, oh. When Pennsylvania and New Jersey would have the All-Star match, I think it was like at 80% of the time, 70% of the time, Pennsylvania would win. And whenever I asked the coach why, they said that they're just so strong. He spoke about like this strength that they had that was just dominating the Jersey wrestlers. And when I was talking to, with the sport specific was the big buzzword. Now it's functional training. Well, he goes, if you're going to train wrestlers, he goes, don't be doing that shit where you're standing on one leg and standing on balance boards. He goes, when is the wrestling mat uneven? He goes, when are you, only wrestling on one leg? And certainly there are times where we're sprawling and it's on one leg and and everything's uneven, but you're never on like this uneven surface. So after that surgery, I was like, this is it, man. I am not going to let any wrestler experience the pain and suffering I've gone through. Not just the physical pain, but the worst part was the emotional pain of training so hard and losing. And I saw these kids that would go to wrestling clubs a lot, but they just weren't nasty. They didn't have the strength. They didn't have this like killer attitude. And I was just determined to help the kids that were losing. I wanted to help the kids that reminded me of me. So I began training kids. I was living with my parents at the time. I started training them out of my house where I lived with my parents, and our backyard was lined up with stones. And I've still got videos of myself training back there. But we had all these stones. I had no money, so I had to be extremely resourceful. So I went to Costco, bought the 300-pound weight set for $99. Got some stuff off eBay. eBay was like brand new, so the deals were just amazing. Everything was, amazing deals on commercial gym equipment. So I got dumbbells, flat benches, a squat rack, and I would train the guys in the garage. Basically, I was doing all like the basic stuff. I was doing benching, deadlifts, squats, heavy one-arm rows, dumbbell farmer walks up and down the driveway. The driveway was like a 30-degree incline. Then I'd take them to the backyard, make them carry the stones, make them press them over their heads. And I started training them the way I remember the guys training in The World's Strongest Man. We had a huge tree that was cut down, so we had the big stump. So I had the guys hitting the big tree stump with sledgehammers and axes. And I was doing it not because I was like, oh, this is the way, this is functional. Essentially, I didn't have a gym. I had no money. I was in debt, so I was wanting to train kids, but with only the stuff I had. And I would train myself at a commercial gym, like a local gym. And one of the kids I had coached in middle school was now in high school, and he was in there lifting, and he was doing like tricep press downs with the rope. And then he was doing like dumbbell side raises with like 15 pounds. I was like, oh my God, like look at this crap. And he was getting trained by a trainer.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I got to say something. So I said to him, I go, dude, you're training exactly how I trained when I was in high school. I go, you just won the counties. I go, you can't train like this if you want to dominate. You're just not going to get strong. And it was just horrible bodybuilding isolation work. Now, there is a place for bodybuilding as far as like the sets and the reps that are used, but as far as like the selection of exercises, those isolation movements, sometimes we use the isolation movements to bring up a weak point, but he was doing just all the wrong stuff. We use bodybuilding sets and reps to put muscle on these kids, but we use specific movements. So long story short, he trained with that guy, finished the season, and then in the summertime, he started training with us. And I remember 2 weeks later, he was competing at one of the big summer tournaments that we have in New Jersey. It's been going on since I was a kid, called the Old Bridge Summer Festival. And it was just 2 weeks ago.